Good morning, everyone. So this is the first session we are going to discuss about the Spring related information, how this particular Spring it is going to work internally, and what are all the advantage we are going to work. We'll try to discuss about the all the information here. Okay. So first, what we need to understand here, what is exactly a Spring basically. Okay. So what is Spring here? So first we need to understand here from where this particular string is introduced here. So we need to understand this particular internal concept of this particular Spring. So later we'll try to define the simple example how we can work on this particular Spring. Getting the point. So how we are trying to discuss about this particular collection framework on Java, because this is the collection frameworks are all the open sources here. Okay, so open source is nothing but we can see the code like how they implemented here. So whenever they are trying to add this particular jar, we can implement the like we can try the implementation how implemented internally. So same way, Spring is also one of the open source for framework. This is also whatever the Spring we are going to discuss here. This is basically open source framework here. Okay, so it is a framework. Basically, it's contain lot of submodules here. So all the submodules we are come up with one group of modules, something like that. We'll call it as a Spring. So inside the Spring, we have a lot of different submodules we are going to have. We'll try to cover up one by one how it is going to work internally. Okay. So because of this, we are going to call it as a Spring is a one framework here. Getting the point. And here, first we'll try to identify the open source framework here. We can see the what are the classes and interface they implemented internally. I will show you the each and every class how it is going to work internally. And another one here, so who is the author of this particular Spring is? So something like Rod Johnson. Getting the point. So this is the person is created this particular Spring framework here. Rod Johnson. Okay. And what is the advantage we have before introducing this particular Spring? Basically, before this particular Spring, we have a enterprise application development. Like we are going to call it as a EJB. The EJB, it is implemented based on this particular Java. Okay. So from the EJB, what are the drawbacks we are having? So based on this particular drawback, Spring is introduced here. Getting the point. This is important here. So what are the drawbacks we identified? Something like inside the EJB, we are having getting the pen we are having the complexity of enterprise application. So this is very complexity here. Okay, whatever this particular EJB we are going to discuss here, this is little bit complexity. Because of this they introduce the our Spring framework here. Getting the pen, this is very important. And what is the advantage we are going to get here? So using this particular Spring, what is the advantage we are going to get? And here the Spring, it is going to make it possible the plain old Java object. So we'll call it as a POJO model. Okay, the Spring internally it is going to work on the POJO model. So we'll identify what exactly the POJO will contain here. Getting the point. So plain old Java object here. Getting the point. So this is the full form of this particular POJO, plain old Java object. Now we'll see how it is going to work internally. So based on this particular the POJO model, Spring is going to work internally. And so Spring is not limited to the server side. Getting the point. We can develop any kind of application. Getting the point. So using this particular Spring, we can develop the any kind of application. And along with this, we are going to test and we are going to use the one of the another advantage called loose coupling. So this is important here. How this particular loose coupling is going to work. These are all the main advantage we are going to get whenever we are trying to discuss about this particular Spring. So it is a one of the open source framework here, and it is created by this particular Rod Johnson. And here, so based on this particular EJB complexity, the Spring is introduced here. So internally, the Spring is going to work based on the this particular POJO model, and we are going to get whenever we are trying to implement the application, so the Spring internally, it is going to work based on this particular loose coupling here. Okay, these are all the main important information we need to understand here. And along with this, Spring is going to provide the many things here, but now we'll try to identify one by one what are the other advantages we are going to get. The first one here, Spring is a lightweight. Okay, so whenever we are trying to introduce this particular Spring, it is a lightweighted framework here. So what is the size it is having? It is having initially when the Spring is introduced, so just 2.5 MB. Okay, now you can think how much the Spring is lightweighted. Getting the point. So with the help of this particular lightweight, we can write any kind of application. So the performance wise as well as any the complexity related, we are going to resolve with the help of this particular Spring framework. And another one advantage here, dependency injection. So we'll call it as a DI. This particular dependency injection is going to work. How this particular dependency injection is going to work internally. So the main dependency injection we need to understand here how this particular dependency injection is going to work internally. Okay. So after this, we need to understand about the container. How this particular container is going to work internally. This is also another advantage we need to discuss here. Something like a container, how this particular container is going to work internally, and different containers. What are the different containers we have internally? Getting the point. These are all the main important information we need to understand from this particular Spring. So first, if we observe the first two, it is a 2.5 MB, and this particular 2.5 MB they distributed as a jar. Getting the point? They distributed as a jar. The jar we are going to add in our dependency section, and we'll try to implement all the Spring related example. Okay, all the Spring related example. Now what I'm doing, whenever we are trying to discuss about this particular dependency injection, how it is going to work. So we have a two types of dependency injections here. We need to understand here how each and every dependency injection is going to work internally. How this particular dependency injection is going to work internally. And later, we need to identify this particular container. So what exactly the container will do, and what are the different types of containers we are having. Getting the point. So basically, if I'm going to show you this particular dependency injection here, and internally Spring is going to provide the So internally the dependency injection is Spring provide the loose coupling. Getting the point. The loose coupling mechanism is going to work with help of this particular dependency injection. Okay. So when this particular dependency injection is applied, the particular objects are going to pass. Getting the point. The objects are going to given to the dependencies instead of creating or looking for the dependent objects. So explicitly we are not going to create any object here. So just we are going to pass the object. The dependency injection is going to take care of this particular information here. Okay. So how this particular dependency injection is going to work? So based on the objects, whatever the object we are going to pass, based on this particular objects here, the dependency injection is going to create. We'll see what kind of the dependency injection we are having. So once we completed the module related example, okay, we'll identify how it is going to work the dependency injection. But what we need to understand here, with help of this particular dependency injection internally, we are going to achieve the loose coupling mechanism here. And whenever, like instead of creating an object, what we will do, just we'll pause the what kind of object we want basically. Okay, the dependency injection is going to take care of creating the all the objects here. Creating the all the objects. Okay, we'll see the types of dependency injection, but the purpose I'm explaining here first, what it will do internally. The purpose of this particular dependency injection, whatever the object we are going to provide in our Spring related classes here, this dependency injection is going to create explicitly without creating manually. The creation object is going to take care of the dependency injection itself here. But how it is going to take care of, we need to provide the dependency mechanism. So this current object is request to the which dependent object. Okay, those information we need to provide. Then the dependency injection is going to take care of creating an object here. So we have a two types of dependency injections here. We'll see how this particular dependency injection is going to work. And here, so container. So what exactly this particular container will do? This particular container, it is going to manage the life cycle and it is going to configure the application object here. Getting the point? So it is going to manage the life cycle of this particular object. Along with this particular object, it will try to configure the whenever we are trying to create the new object. So now observe carefully. So container itself, it's going to take care of the creating and managing. Getting the point? Creating, managing the objects, whatever the new objects we created internally. Getting the point? This is very important information we need to understand. So in our Spring, so just we are going to declare how your how this particular application objects should be created. Just we are going to share the information how we want to create an object, but explicitly we are not going to create any objects. The object creations, everything is going to take care of this particular container. Getting the point? But we'll specify how we want to create an object here. Getting the point? The object creation, managing an object, and the life cycle of this particular each and every object internally, it is going to take care of this particular container. Getting the point? This is important. And now what we will do, before we discuss about this particular dependency injection and container, we'll try to identify the modules. What are the different modules we are having? Now observe carefully. I'm trying to explain the different module what we are having so far. The basically first module is core. Okay, first we are going to discuss this particular core module because core is the base for all the module. This particular core is the base for all the module. Now later what we will do, here we'll try to discuss about the DO module. And here I'm trying to write DO module. And the same way we have another ORM module. So using this particular DO module, we are going to write the ORM module here. Getting the point? This is important. So this DO basically using this particular DO, we are going to connect the databases. We are going to connect the database and ORM. So this is the different frameworks we are going to use. It's like a Hibernate. Getting the point? So using this particular ORM model, we are going to communicate the Hibernate related examples here. Getting the point? This is important information. We need to understand how this particular DO and ORM is going to work. So this is the one module. So DO is a one module, ORM is a another module. And later, now what we will do, we'll try to discuss about the web module. Getting the point? We'll try to discuss about the web module, how this particular web module is going to work internally. Right. And so once we define this particular web module, we are having some other related sections here. So we'll discuss about the JMS, the Java message service. Inside the Java message service, we'll try to work on the one of the important how we can send the message related informations. Like here, we'll try to use the Kafka related example. So the JMS will contain Kafka related example here. We'll see what is the default mechanism we are going to have, and later what are the different advantage we are going to get here. So we'll identify how this particular example it is going to work internally. And we have another module, something like REST related. Okay, so we'll simply, I'm trying to write as a REST template. REST template. Using this particular REST template, we are going to communicate the other applications here. So one application to other applications, how we are going to connect this particular REST template, and we are going to call it as a remoting. Okay, so remoting we are going to call. So first we need to discuss more about this particular core, because core is the main platform for this particular remaining modules here. And later we'll discuss about this particular DO and ORM module. And later we'll move on to the web module. And so using this particular web module, we are going to connect to this particular JMS. And inside this particular JMS, we'll try to write the like a REST template, how we can communicate the one application to another application. So here we are going to use the one of the important the interface called REST template. We'll identify how it is going to work internally. This mechanism we'll call it as a remoting independent. So if the application is not identified by this particular core, even though we can communicate the another application by specifying the URL. With the help of this particular URL, we can easily connect it to the other applications here. The URL construction related section we'll discuss inside this particular REST template here. Okay, these are all the some module we have inside this particular Spring. But everything, if I want to discuss anything, first we need a core here. Getting the point? We need to understand core module, then only we'll try to discuss about the another module. And inside this particular core container, as I explained here, we are going to discuss this particular bean factory as well as application context. Okay, the core container internally, it is divided into two subcategories. Okay, this particular container is divided into two categories. First one is bean factory and application context. Okay, these are all the two interfaces we are having. These two interfaces internally, it will try to work on this particular container behavior. We'll identify one by one how it is going to work internally. The application context, it is going to have some advantages compared to this particular bean factory. First, we'll discuss about this particular bean factory, and later we'll move on to this particular application context here. Okay, so and after this, we'll try to discuss about the database. Inside the database, like a DO module, what we are going to discuss here, we'll try to discuss about the JDBC drawbacks here. JDBC drawbacks, and later, so Spring related sections here. Okay, and inside the Spring JDBC we are having, we'll identify how this particular Spring JDBC is going to work. What are all the different template classes we are having, we identify. After this, we'll move on to the Hibernate sections. We'll move on to the Hibernate sections here. This is important, we need to understand. After this particular, so Spring JDBC is completed, we'll move on to the Hibernate. This Hibernate will comes under the ORM module. Okay, so same way we'll discuss about the one by one. Like we are going to have a MVC framework. The MVC will try to define inside this particular web. The particular MVC we are going to discuss inside this particular web module. So same way we are having the message service or remote related service. Okay, these are all the basic module we are going to discuss inside this particular Spring framework. So any questions regarding this particular modules? Okay. So if we don't have anything, now we'll start the simple example how it is going to work internally. Now what I will do here, I'm going to create one more folder here. So the core we cannot use basically. We'll try to come up with one more Java project here. Getting the point? Here I'm trying to discuss about this particular Spring core here. So the same source I'm going to use here, and I'm trying to click on finish here. We are not going to create any module. So after creating this, now what I will do, here I'm going to create one package here. So everything we are going to discuss the package. Inside the package only, we'll try to write all the information. So com dot spring hyphen core. So here this hyphen is not taking. We should come up with com dot spring dot core. Okay, this is important, we need to understand. After creating this particular package, I'm going to create one interface here. So observe carefully what is the interface I'm trying to create here. Something like greeting service. This is important information we need to understand. The greeting service. So what exactly the interface will do? So we are trying to write one abstract method and simply say greeting. Okay, one abstract method I'm defining. So again, don't ask about the what is the abstract method will do. Get in the pen. So this is not a right time to discuss about this particular abstract method because we are already familiar with this, how it is going to work internally. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to write one implementation class. Okay, I'm trying to write this particular implementation class, and here greeting service. So this is basically interface we are going to use. Now if we observe, this is the implementation class we are having. IMPL is nothing but implementation. So this is the particular greeting service is interface we implemented under this particular class, and we are overriding this particular method. Now what we will do, we'll try to write the specific code here. Now if you see here, what I'm doing here, I'm trying to declaring this particular variable. So private string one greeting variable I'm defining. After defining this particular greeting variable, I'm going to write the default constructor. This is okay. So I will remove this particular public. Now this is the default constructor I'm defining, and one more constructor I'm going to write. One more constructor I'm trying to define here, and which is expecting one parameter, something like greeting. This dot greeting is equals to greeting. Okay. Now observe carefully what I'm doing is, here I'm trying to defining one class, which one property we are defining inside this particular class, and one is a default constructor, and another one is a parameters constructor. If you see, even though if you are trying to discussing the Spring concept, again we are trying to write the same, the core Java concepts what we discuss here. Okay. After this, now what I'm doing is, I'm trying to write this particular overriding the message, whatever the method we overrided here, and simply I'm writing here greeting here. Simply I'm trying to write the greeting property, whatever we used line number 4. Okay. And this is all about the important information we need to understand. And one method I'm trying to write here. Here also I'm trying to write one method, and this particular method basically set a greeting. Now if you see here, this section we'll call it as a setter di. Okay. So get in the pen, the setter dependency injection, and this section we'll call it as a constructor di. These are all the two important information we need to understand. So whatever the dependency injection we identified here, and we have a two types here. The first one is constructor dependency injection, and another one is setter dependency injection. We'll identify how this particular the two dependency injections are going to work, and which one is the which in the which scenario we can use the which dependency injection. So I will explain this particular sections later, but observe the simple example. So we created one service, and the service is implemented by implementation classes A, and we are having one property called greeting, and this particular greeting right now we are going to provide the message here. Okay. And finally, now what I'm doing here, I'm going to discuss about the one main class. Okay. So the main class here, Spring Core main, and I'm going to generate the main class. And after this, and here what I'm trying to do, here I'm trying to providing, here I'm trying to providing main file. This particular main file we are going to create the object. So if we want to create this particular object, what we need here, we need some jars here, spring related jars. If I'm going to use the bean factory, I'm not getting any jars here. Okay, now what we can do, so here basically if you are not using the Maven related applications here, now what we will do, we'll try to convert this particular application. We'll download the jars and we'll try to specify in the source directory. Getting the point? We'll try to download and we'll try to add into this particular source directory. Now what I'm doing is this particular Spring Core, I'm trying to converting into the Maven project. Getting the point? Now you can see inside the configure we are having converted to Maven project. Whenever we are trying to converting the Maven project, so we'll try to see one additional file called pom.xml. Getting the point? Pom.xml. This is important here. This particular information we'll discuss later, what exactly this particular information will do. Now I'm trying to converting it to the finish. So whenever I'm trying to converting here, now you can see we are having one file called pom.xml. So this is the pom.xml. It is available here. Now what we will do, so inside this we'll try to specify the spring related jars here. Spring related jars. What are the spring related jars we need here? Now I am going to use the one website here to download the jars sections here. Okay, so here I'm going to use this particular website to download the jars here. And here Maven repository. So this is the website we'll use to get the spring related jars. Now you can search here something like Spring Core. Getting the point? Spring Core I'm going to use. And here this is the Spring Core we are having, and up to the what is the current version we are having here, 5.3.22. So when it is released here, so in the July 2022 it is released here. Getting the point? In the July 2022 it is released here. Now this is the important information we need to understand here. Now observe carefully. We are not going to discuss about this particular 5 versions or 4 versions. We'll try to discuss about the from this particular 2.5 onwards here. Getting the point? We'll try to discuss about this particular 2.5 in a version like 2.51 or 2, 3 or 3, 4 anything. Now I'm going to use this particular 2.5.4. So we'll discuss from this particular version onwards. So now what you understanding? We are discussing about the from 2 versions. So we'll see what are all the different information we are having each and every versions here. Now what I'm doing is I'm going to add this particular section under this particular dependency. Here I'm adding, here I'm trying to add this particular Spring Core. Whenever I'm trying to add here, so whenever I'm trying to save this, here now you can see it is trying to download the jar here. Now the particular jar is trying to download here. So where it is available inside this particular Maven dependency, if you try to expand this, so Spring Core and commons login. So why we are getting this particular commons logging here? This commons logging internally it is trying to depends on this particular Spring Core here. Getting the point? This is very important information we need to understand. So this particular jar is now available inside our Maven dependencies here. Whenever it is available, now what I'm trying to use here, let me go to this. Here I'm going to write the bean factory. Now what happening internally? Getting the point? Here still we are not getting any the bean factory. So why we are not getting any bean factory here? So whatever this particular Spring Core we provided, now you can see inside the Spring Core whether the bean factory is available or not. If I'm trying to expand this, these are all the package information we need to understand. Now you can see org spring framework dot asm package, commons package, signature and core. So this is important, the packages we need to understand here. Now observe inside the core what are the classes we are having here. So this is the interface we are having, and this is the exception related classes we are having. Now you can see, getting the way. This is the one exception they created. So constant exception, and this is extending from the illegal argument exception. Now if you see, this is the one of the our Java exception here. Okay, but they created one own exception class inside the Spring. Now you can see, as I explained here, Spring is a open source framework. We are able to see that all the classes are not here. Now you can see all the classes you can see. But inside this particular example, we don't have the bean factory here. Whatever we are discussing the section bean factory, it is not available because the class, the interface, basically bean factory is an interface. It is available in the factory package. Now if you can see any factory package we are having here. So enum IO support and something like filter, common util and exceptions here. We don't have the particular factory related sections here. Now what is the best jar we need to use? Getting the, what is the best jar we can go for this particular Spring related example? Now I'm trying to go for the same Maven repository package. Here I'm going to write Spring context here. Okay, Spring context we are going to use the same whatever the version we are using, the version called 2.5.4. Okay, we'll discuss this particular version for all the Spring Core related example. Now here inside this particular pom.xml, I'm going to add the particular versions information here. Getting the pin. Again, the context I'm adding. Whenever I'm adding this particular context here, now what you need to understand, the context is also downloading. Now whenever it is downloaded, now if you observe carefully, what happens internally? So context internally it is download AOP related concepts here and Spring Beans here. And these core internally it is depends on the comments logic. Okay, now so how many jars we are having right now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 jars. If you are not using this particular Maven dependencies, what we need explicitly we need to download this particular jars and we need to add into this particular project. Then only our Spring related examples are going to run. Getting me? So which one is the best option? Once we convert it into the core, like a Spring Core application into the Maven project here. Like simply we are adding the jars information here. It is trying to downloading all the dependencies here. Now if you want to see the hierarchy, now you click on this particular dependency hierarchy, how it is working. Now inside the core we are having the commons logic, and inside this particular Spring context, so you can see Spring Core also it is available. Spring Core also available here. Now why we need to write explicitly this particular core here? Because inside the context we are getting the Spring Bean, and inside the Spring Bean again we are having Spring Core, and explicitly also we are having Spring Core. These are all the dependencies. These are all the dependencies here. Now if you try to remove this, if you remove this, even though we'll get the Spring Core related information. We'll get the Spring Core related information. Now you can see only one jar we are having as of now, that is the context here, and internally it is expecting these two dependencies and Spring Beans and Spring Core. Getting the point. This is the dependency hierarchy we need here, because so multiple jars are also we are not going to add here. Getting the point. What are the required jars? Those required jars only we need to use. Without like if you're trying to specify multiple jars, what happens internally? The application will increase. The size of this particular application is going to increase here. So with the help of this particular dependency hierarchy, we can discuss here what are all the dependencies we are having. If you are having any explicit jars, you can remove those. So right now we remove the particular Spring Core, adding the additional jar here. Okay, now we'll come back to here. Now we'll see these are all the contexts. Now after adding this particular context jar, we need to discuss about bean factory. Now if we observe carefully, we are able to see this particular bean factory, it is coming. Bean factory, now it is showing this particular information here. Now where this particular bean factory is available? Inside this particular, so I will show you bean factory. So where it is coming, this particular bean factory? Inside the org Spring Framework bean.factory, and which is coming under the Spring iPhone beans. Now if I want to use, how many jars we need to use? Explicitly, if I'm not using this particular context here, we need to use the beans and we need to use the core, because the core is the main jar. It will try to use the all the basic classes here. The base classes we are going to use under this particular core jar. Okay. Now we identify, finally we are getting this particular bean factory. So bean factory basically is one of the container. Okay, we discussed the container. This is the one of the container. Now what I am doing is, internally I'm trying to create a bean factory is an interface. We need to create object of implementation classes. Implementation classes. Now what I'm doing is XML bean factory. XML bean factory. XML bean factory is the implementation of this particular bean factory. Now, what is the parameter is expecting? Resource. This resource we already discussed here. Whenever we are trying to discuss about the input and output stream, we identify the the particular resource information. Now, if you see, if I'm going to explain this, is expecting the resource information, and if I'm trying to expand this particular resource here, this is the one of the interface we are having resource. Now it is extending from this particular input stream. Where it is coming? org Spring Framework core.io. Okay, so this is the core jar. Now if I'm going to expand this, here you can see resource we are having, which is coming from the Spring core. So here hierarchy it is showing here. Here it is trying to show this particular hierarchy where this particular resource interface is available inside this particular Spring core package. And earlier, what we discussed here, bean factory related, the bean factory is coming under the Spring-bean. Now, if you see the core jar we are using and the beans jar we are using. So, if you try to specify explicitly what we can do, we can use the context. The context internally, it is trying to download these two dependencies here. Okay, this is important here. Now, after this, if I'm going to show you this particular input stream, what happening internally? This is the input stream. Like we discussed the input stream and output stream when we are trying to discuss about the same IO related information. So the same information they implemented with the help of this particular Spring org Spring Framework dot core.io package. Getting the pen. Now what you need to understand, resource is the, but basically it is an interface. Again, we need to specify the implementation classes. We need to specify the implementation classes. Now we will use the file system, and we'll go for the later class path resource. We'll discuss these two examples, how it is going to work internally. Getting the point? Because resource is an interface, it is implemented by this particular all the implementation classes. But these are all the classes not required here. We'll try to go for the class path and file system. Getting the point? But whenever you're trying to providing this particular file in the different location, we can use the URL resource. Okay, URL resource here. This is important, we need to understand here. Later, this byte array, it's not required as of now. We'll see if it is required, we discuss it. But now what I'm doing is, I'm trying to use this particular file system resource. And here I'm going to use the new object. File system resource I'm using. And now you can see the file system resource internally, it is trying to expecting here two parameter. The first one is expecting file object and the second one is expecting path here. String path here, like whatever the string path we need to specify here, we can specify here. So far, As of now, I don't have any file here. So what is the file we need to create? This is important here. What is the file we need to create? This particular file only, it's loaded by this particular bean factory. After loading this particular bean factory, now what it will do, it will try to identify what are all the classes we provided under this particular file, and based on the classes information, it will try to create the object. Once object is created, we can use those object here. Getting the point? This is important. Now if you see, I will show you what are the information we need to provide under this particular the file here. The file first I'm trying to create in the source directory only, because we'll try to discuss about the class related example. And now if you see, what is the name of the file I'm trying to give? Something like spring-code.xml. We need to extend with this particular file as XML. Getting the point? We need to provide the one of the XML file here. So inside this particular XML file only, we'll specify all the classes information. Now you can see, this is the file I'm trying to create in here. After this, what you need to understand here, we need to provide the file information. So the file format is going to look like this. This is the file format is going to look like this, and here we can provide this particular bean tag. These are all the tags we are going to discuss here. First, this is the main tag. We are going to use the beans, and under this particular bean tags, we are going to use the bean. Getting the point? Now, if you see why we are using this particular schema location. Okay, to understand more, now what I'm doing here, I'm trying to copy this XSD. I'm trying to copy this particular XSD, and we'll see what happening internally. What is the information we are having? Getting the point? This is the XSD which is provided by the Spring. What exactly it is contained here? If you try to search this bean tag, here we are trying to providing the element name called beans tag. Whatever the tags we are going to use inside this particular XML file, all the tags we are going to load from this particular XSD. Okay, so XSD basically it will try to declare what kind of the tag we want to use. So those tags will define under this particular XSD, and those tags we are going to use inside this particular XML here. The XSD internally it will give you the tags information. Now you can see, so it start with the bean tag here. Under this particular bean tag we are going to use one more bean tag here. So these are all the XSD related example. Again, if I'm going to explain, this is going to be different concept here, because we need to understand the XSD and XML how it is going to work. But just I'm giving, so inside the XSD, whatever the information we are having, those information we are going to access inside our whatever the file we created. Okay, so first we are discussing the beans. So this is the XML element. This is, we'll call it as a root element, and inside this particular root element only, we are going to discuss all the bean information. And now if I'm going to search with the bean, okay, here now you can see element to reference bean, where this particular bean is created. Same way, element name beans, how we are creating, same way it is try to create one of the bean information. Now you can see here we are having XSD colon element name called bean. Now this is the sub element, because beans will contain multiple beans. Okay, bean will contain only one object. So first, what you understanding it, the schema location we are identifying it, and this is basically from where we are going to load. This is our main location here. This is our main location. This particular bean, like beans -2.0 XSD file is contained. If I'm going to show you this, if I'm coming back to this, it will contain lot of information here. Now you can see 2.0, 2.5, 3, 3.12, 4, 4.1, and finally this is the fifth version. Here we are not specifying anything. Now after this particular 2020, it is stop this. The XSD no longer we are not using here. But even you can see these are all the XSD information. Now if you go to this, you can see the lot of information here. These are all the information like EOP. So where is the context? This is the only will contain the beans related section. Now I want to see the anywhere cache. Here you can see MVC we are having. This is the MVC related XSD. Get in the pen. So beans related we identified, MVC related we identified, and the same way we are going to have transaction related. So transaction related, these are all the transaction related. We'll discuss here how the each and every XSD it is internally implemented. Get in the pen. These are all the different information we need to understand the particular XSD, and this is the JDBC related XSD, and JMS related we are having one more XSD. So here we are having JMS related XSD. Okay, XSD basically it will try to contain the specific module tags here. Okay, for this particular core we are going to use this particular Spring Beans here. Okay, now we identified this. Inside this particular beans we are having the particular XSD information. So we define the open B tag here beans and we close this here. And after this, now what I'm doing is I'm trying to declare bean tag here. Now you can see bean tag I'm trying to declare. So after this particular bean, now what are the properties we need to define? Inside the bean only, we need to define the property. So here you can see what are the properties we are having. So abstract, auto-wire, okay, and class, dependency checks, and depends on the destroy method, factory bean, and we have a, so different attributes we are having. Okay, different attributes we are having. I'm going to use something like ID. Get in the bin. I want to provide the ID of this particular bean. So what is the ID I'm trying to providing? Something like a greeting service. And I'm going to use another property like another attribute. We are going to use a class here. So where this particular class is resides here. Class basically we should provide the implementation class, not the interface here. So the implementation class it should available with a fully qualified name. The fully qualified name basically it's look like this spring like a com dot spring dot core dot and creating service IMPL. So this is the class name we need to provide like this with the help of this particular fully qualified name here. With help of like along with the class name we are going to add the package name also. Then only the container can understand where this particular class is available and it will try to create an object of this particular greeting service IMPL. But how it is going to create with the help of this particular ID it will create. And inside this particular class we are having one property here. We are having one property. What is the property we are having? Something like greeting here. Getting the point. Now here we are having property. So this property tags we are trying to use inside the bean. Getting the point. Inside the bean tag only. This is important here. Okay, I'm using this particular property. If you say this, so this particular property also will come under the the same whatever the beans we are using here. You can see. So here we are having the element ref dot property, element different property, and another one. So element name we are going to use. We'll see where it is available. This is not here. Now you can see element name property. Whatever the tag we are using, the tag is going to use as a element name. This particular property we'll try to use like this. Getting the pen. This is the way the tags we are going to use. And the another tag we use just now, bean tag here. Okay, and inside this particular bean tag, what are the other property we are using? ID and class. Now if I'm going to use bean, where it is available, this is an attribute here. So element name is bean. Okay, inside this particular bean, if you see, we'll try to identify the ID as well as the particular class properties also. So now you can see where it is defined here. source property, constructor argument we are having, and identity any type bean. Definitely, all the properties we are going to have inside this particular XSD. Let me try with the class here. We'll start from the top so that we can easily understand where this particular class is defined. Now you can see attribute name is class. So this is available under the where is the bean? Okay, this is the comes under the alias name and name import description default auto-wire. Okay, these are all the class level here. Now basically what I want to provide, so this is the way of writing the attribute name is equals to class. Same way we'll try to define the attribute name is equals to ID. But that information we'll try to define under this particular bean tag. Now that we need to understand where the bean tag is defined here. These are all the meta type value map. I think here only we are having. So element name bean. Constructor argument and right side. Okay, so this is the attribute to create this particular class section here. This is we are trying to use how we are trying to define this particular attribute. Same way, we'll use all the attributes here, whatever we are trying to define it, like ID, and this is the different tag. Okay, coming back to here, the property. So if you are working any tag here, the tag should available inside the XSD. If it is not available, those tags we cannot use here. Now observe carefully. So bean tag I'm declaring here. Inside the bean tag I'm giving the ID and the class. After this I'm trying to defining the property. So what exactly the property will contain? First we are defining the name. What is the name of the property? The name of the property, whatever we given, something like greeting, and here now you can provide the value here. So value, one more attribute we are having, and what is the attribute we can provide here? Welcome to something like Spring Framework. This is the simple message I'm providing here. Getting the point? Whenever I'm trying to providing this particular message, where this particular message it is going to use, that is important here. Now focus carefully. Here I'm trying to providing this particular message, and now we need to understand how this particular message it is going to use here. Okay, so observe carefully. Whenever I'm trying to go to this particular example, here what is the file we need to provide here? The file we need to provide something like spring-core.xml. Getting the point? Now why we are giving this particular file? Because inside this particular file only we are having the particular object related section. So whatever the classes we created, so those classes information is available under this particular spring-core.xml. Okay, once this particular file is loaded, now what we will do? We'll try to use the bean factory. So using this particular bean factory, now what we are doing here? We are trying to getting the point. We are trying to converting into the our class type here. So how I'm going to convert it? Factory dot bean factory dot get bean here. Here we need to specify the name of the bean. So what is the bean we are trying to load? So what is the bean we are trying to load? Whatever the bean we created inside this particular spring-core.xml, and we need to give the ID. This ID here I'm going to specify here. Whenever I'm trying to specify like this, now what happens internally? This class we are going to load. Okay, this particular class we are going to load. Right. After loading this particular class, now what we are doing is we are trying to use whatever the method we created. Something like now you can see greeting service I'm using. Something like a service. So here it is a typecasting here. Getting the point? This particular typecast we already identified whenever we are discussing the Java related example. Now using this typecasting, now what I'm doing is service dot, what is the method we are having? Something like say greeting. Something like the say greeting we are calling. But if you see anywhere we are creating the object with the help of this particular new keyword here. So new something like greeting. IMPL. Anywhere we are creating this like new greeting service IMPL? No, we are not creating anywhere here. So just we provided the classes information under this particular spring-core.xml file. Now we'll see how it is going to work internally. Now, if I'm going to run this example, what is the message we'll get here? First, we are getting an exception. Why this particular exception is getting? What happening internally? Whatever the file we specified, spring-core.xml, this particular file is not available. Okay, file not found exception. We already familiar with this particular file not found exception. Okay, instead of this particular file system resource, what is the another important information we can use? So this particular, the class path I'm trying to use. Okay, here I'm going to use this particular class path information. Now you can see whenever I'm trying to use this particular class path here, now observe the example, what happening internally. So whatever this particular property we given here, it is wrong here. Now you can see invalid property exception. Invalid property exception. Where we given this particular property, now if you read this, inside this particular greeting service IMPL, we could not identify the particular property here. Okay. Now where we are doing this particular like a typo mistake here inside this particular spring-core example. It is not a P, it should be greeting. It should be G here. Okay, so this is the small typo mistake we did here. Now I'm trying to run one more time. Now if you see, welcome to Spring Framework here. Getting the point. So how we are getting this particular message? The particular message where we provided. These are all the important information we need to understand here. Using this particular, the file, whatever the file we created here, using this particular file, we are trying to load the first, the particular bean, and the bean we are trying to converting into the greeting service. And after converting this particular greeting service, whatever the special method we are having, the say greeting method, we are calling this. Okay. So any questions here? Any questions regarding this particular example?
Sir,
Okay. Can you repeat again?
Can you show that spring-core.xml file?
Okay.
Okay. I just want to.
– 12 to 13. So there is no 12 to 13 line. Okay. So remaining person, you can ask the question. So what you are having? All are clear about this example?
Sir, I have one question. Sir,
Okay.
it's easier to create an object, right? Instead of creating Spring Core, XML file, and all this. Instead of that, simply creating object is easier, right?
See,
So,
basically here we are having only one object we can easily create. But in the real-time example, we'll try to create 1,000 of classes. But all the objects you are not going to create. And the maintenance is very difficult here. Getting the point. Basically, so what I want to show you, now you can imagine we have 1,000 classes. Okay, and inside the 1,000 classes, we are having 20 common classes. This particular 20 common classes, we are going to use in the multiple location, not only the one location. For example, let me go to this. Where is the XML constant? Okay, if I will show you this, now you can imagine this. These are all the classes. Okay, these are all the classes we only created. whatever the classes it's showing here, these are all the classes. Not only this, you can imagine these are all the different packages, because in the real time we are going to create the multiple packages with the multiple classes. But how you are going to create this particular classes? First question, you can create the with a new operator. So you can create this particular new operator. But if you see, so here we are having the conversion one class is there here. Basically, it is an abstract class, but even though, imagine this is the normal class conversion. This conversion class we are trying to use around 25 places. 25 places in our this particular whatever the Spring Core the project we created. Now what you will do in the 25 locations again you are going to create this object with the help of the new with the help of this particular new keyword. How we are going to manage this?
Okay,
Getting the
sir.
This is
Yeah.
important here because in the dependency injection, these objects automatically it will load from the whatever the file we specified here. Instead of creating the multiple times the object, the same object we are going to reusable multiple times. So this is the main advantage we are going to get from this particular Springware. So that's why I'm explaining the container internally. It will handle the creating an object, managing an object, and the each and every object life cycle, like creating to destroy. Each and everything is going to handle by the container. What is the right now the container we are having? Something like this one. Bean factory. Bean factory is a one container. So container basically we created one interface. This interface will handle all the information, whatever the object we specified here.
Okay, sir. Yeah. And one more question. So, is there any reason you've used 2.5.4 version of the dependency, sir?
See, we want to see from the XML onwards. From the XML, it is started in the two versions only, like beginning only, not the two. Like Spring 1.0, it is started all the XML related, and later in the 2.5, it is started annotations here. But 2.5 is the base. Like we can discuss about the XML related as well as we can discuss about the annotations related. Annotations example are started from the 2.5 only. Because of that, I'm trying to use this. Otherwise, you can use the like whatever we are having the another options here. Now if you see, these are all the versions we are having. You can use like from the 1.1, 1.2, 3, 4 something. But all the example, it will work only XML related sections, not the annotations related exam. Because of that, I use the 2.5 version onwards. So you can use the latest version. There is no issue. Because you can see here, we already discussed, right? The XSD, it is having up to the 4.3, and here you can specify the version also. Without the version, whatever the XSD we are going to use, it will try to index the the jars, whatever the jars we are using. Here, if you compare with this spring-bean dot xsd, but whatever we are using right now, it is containing a 2.2.0 dot xsd. Here we are specifying the version, but here we don't have any version. This particular latest one, it will satisfy all the versions whatever we are using inside the pom.xml. If you are trying to use this particular version as a 5 version, okay, 5 version. Now automatically this XSD it will convert it into the 5. But here we don't need to specify the version. We don't need to specify the particular static version. Internally, it will take care of the version conversion based on this particular jar, whatever we are going to use internally. Okay, because of that, the latest version they did not use the version specific here. Now you can see up to this we are having the 4 version, 4.1, 4.2, 4.3. and 2.0, 2.5, 3.0, 3.1, something like we have a XSD versions. Because why we are using this particular XSD version? Each and every version, some additional tags they introduce here.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, any other questions here? Okay, So if we don't have anything, now we'll try to identify the one more example, how it is going to work. So to identify this particular example, now we need to discuss about the main important example on the dependency injection. Getting the point? Dependency injection. So far, whatever the dependency injection I explained here, the constructor as well as setter injection. But finally, which one we are calling here? Let me delete this first. I don't need to use this. Okay. So these are all the main classes we are going to use here. Observe carefully. These are all the four classes we are using here. Now, what we need to explain here inside the greeting service IMPL. First, I explain this is the constructor dependency injection, and another one is we want to discuss about the setter dependency injection. Getting the point? Now, what we need to understand, what is the differences? Which one is the best in? So, if you see the simple example in the Java, when this particular method we are going to call, and when this particular constructor it is going to call. Any idea? So any idea when this particular method we are going to call and when we can call this particular constructor?
Constructor we can call at the time of interface.
At the time of?
Interface classes like
Okay.
extension into the implementation related methods.
Okay.
Constructed during object creation, sir.
Okay.
Method was used for updating the values.
Okay. So simple information what I am trying to explain here. So here with the help of this particular new keyword and we'll try to pass the constructor information. At the time of creating an object, we are going to pass this particular constructor. This is the default constructor or the any parameters construct the parameters constructor we are going to use. But method basically after creating an object. For example, we are having test here. So test t1 is equals to new test here. This is basically constructor. Okay, this is basically constructor. And now what I'm doing is t1 dot something like one more method I'm going to call say method. Getting the point? This is the method calling. So see the differences basically constructor calling and method calling. Constructor it is a mandatory because without the constructor we are not going to create an object. But without calling this particular method we can perform some other operations here. Getting the point? This is important here. Without creating an object, like without calling this particular constructor, we are not going to create an object. But here, without calling this particular method, we can perform some other actions information, like some other operations. So this is optional. Okay, and this is mandatory. Getting the point? This is important. We need to understand. The constructor dependency injection is mandatory, and the setter dependency injection is optional. Whenever we are passing this particular constructor dependency injection, we need to create the dependency object, like dependent object to first. Later, then we are going to create the parent object. For example, what is the two information? Here I am one having person object is a parent object, and person internally it is trying to come up with the user. Person internally it is come up with the user. Now what I'm doing here I'm trying to create a one constructor. The constructor internally is expecting something like user parameter. Okay, user parameter. Now what I will do, this dot user is equals to user I'm going to pass. Getting the point? This is the constructor I created. Whenever I'm trying to create this particular person, first what we need to create? User object we need to create. Without the user object create, so is there a way to call this particular constructor? No. Getting the point? So here we don't have a other option. First we need to create the user object. How I'm going to create a user object? User u1 is equals to new user here. Getting the point? And this user one, now what I'm doing is, whenever I'm trying to call this particular person constructor, here I'm going to pass the u1. This is important. So whenever, like without this particular u1, we are not able to call this particular person constructor here. This is important here. So this is for the mandatory purpose. If I'm not providing this particular u1, the application is not going to run. It will give an exceptions here. Get in the point. This is whenever we need to understand when we are going to use the like a mandatory dependency injection, that is called constructor dependency injection, and when we can go for the setter dependency injection, that is called optional dependency injection here. This is first we need to discuss here, like we need to think which is the best one. Okay, now I will show you lot of example on these two dependency injections here. So first, is it clear? Any questions? When we can go for the constructor and when we can go for the setter? Okay, so if it is clear, now I will try to show you the one more example in the Spring how it is going to work. Now observe carefully. So dependency injection, how it is going to work internally. Basically, whenever we are trying to create a multiple object, for example, here I'm trying to discuss with our one class. I'm going to create class. Okay, so round table. This is the table, like a table class I'm trying to create here. And internally, what happening internally? So I'm trying to discussing the name of this particular round table, the property I'm using, and another one. Now what I'm doing is, so guest is like the around this particular table we are going to discuss, like we are going to set the guest related information. Now I'm trying to create the guest object here. Okay, I'm trying to create the particular guest object. Now what you need to understand, so far this object is not available. Whenever this object is not available internally, what we can do, we need to create the class here. So I'm trying to create the class, and this particular class internally, what I'm doing is I'm trying to generating default constructor. Okay, after generating this particular default constructor, now this guest internally, it is contain the one of the person information. Get in the bin. Internally, it will try to come up with the one person. Now what I'm doing is, here I'm trying to have one method. Basically, so person I'm trying to return here, and load person. Okay, load person. And what we can do, we can throw the exception here. Person exception. Getting the point. This is important. Now you can see, first we need to create a one person class. Now I'm trying to create a one person class. And what all the information we are having for this particular person? Something like person can contain the ID, and it's contain something like first name, last name. Okay, and I'm going to generate this particular methods here. So using this particular getters and setters, we are going to generate the method. Now you can see, so get ID, set ID, and first name, and here I'm trying to setting the first name, here I'm trying to return the first name here. This is important information we need to understand how this particular methods are generated here. This is the one of the person record. After coming to this, so inside the guest, we are trying to throw an exception. Let me create the P should be capital. Person exception. Okay, now what I'm doing is, here I'm trying to create the person exception inside this particular core. We need to extend from the exception class. So it by default it is extended. And after this, what I will do, I'm going to add one property called message. and I will try to generate the default constructor, and we don't need to generate the default. It should be okay, we'll use the default to 1, and I'm using the super, and one more constructor. One more constructor. This particular constructor, now it is going to take as a string message. Super constructor I'm calling. After this dot message is equals to, okay, message, the constructor object we created. Now we'll come back to the guest here. Okay, now what we are returning here? Here I'm trying to return the person. To return this particular person, now what we can do? Let me generate the constructor, like parameters constructor here. Constructor using the field, I'm going to generate this, and finally here return new person, and ID I'm trying to give as a 12, and first name we are going to give as a spring, and second name, the last name I'm trying to give as a framework. Now sorry, observe here, now what I'm doing here, the guest internally it is trying to load this particular person object. If the person is not available, we'll throw an exception. Okay, if the person is not available, we are going to throw an exception. Now what I'm doing so this is the one of the round table object I created, and internally I'm trying to pass this particular guest here. Now what I will do basically, so here I'm trying to create one method here. What is the method I'm going to create here? So the method, it should be like I'm going to return person, something like a meeting, because with the help of this particular round table we are going to do some meeting on the various issues here. Okay, now what I'm doing here, I'm going to return guest dot load person. Guest dot load person, here I'm going to check an exception with the try catch block. Now here, instead of returning this, now what we can understand here, person is equals to get person, finally person. Okay, this particular person is not going to use here. Here I will return null. Getting the point. So this is we are going to check. If we are getting any exception, this person exception is handled, and we'll try to print the message. Otherwise, we can write if it is a null, you can throw an exception. Okay, here only you can throw an this exception is different. Like this, we already discussed in the core Java. No need to discuss about this. But what we need to understand here, this is important here. But how I am creating this guest here? So far, I did not creating any guest object here. Getting the point? I did not create any guest object. With help of reference, just we declare here. So far, it is a null only. Getting the point? This object is null. With help of this particular null, we are trying to call this particular. We're trying to call this particular load person object. Now, what happens internally? It will give an exception. But how we need to create an object? So this is the way I'm trying to creating an object. Now you can see public and round table and string name I'm trying to providing. This dot name is equals to name, and after this guest is equals to object. Okay, so this is the way of creating this particular object. Sorry, constructor I miss. Getting the point? This is the way of creating this particular object. But here, so this is, we'll call it as a tight coupling. Okay, this is, we'll call it as a tight coupling. So why we are going to call it as because here only we are creating an object. Because in the Spring we are not going to create any object with help of this particular new keyword. Getting the point. But here what we are doing here, we are trying to create. This is section, we'll call it as the tight coupling, but we are not going to use the tight coupling. Spring will provide the loose coupling mechanism. Here, just we'll specify an object. Here we are going to specify an object. What kind of an object we are going to use here. So I want to exclude this. I want to exclude, but here I am going to use the same here. The guest only I am going to use. But whenever I am trying to call this particular method, I don't want to get any exceptions here. So how we can do that? Okay, if I'm trying to comment this, finally what happens internally, this line will get an exception, because so far the particular object is not yet created, just we declare this particular object here. Okay, now what you need to understand here, this is important here, we are going to create this one of the interface, and with the help of this particular interface here, we'll try to discuss about the object creations, all those things here. Now, if we observe here, instead of providing this particular class, basically the guest right now we created as a one class here. Okay, now what I will do, I will modify this particular guest as a interface here. So once I modified this particular class as an interface, now what we can understand here, okay, I'm not going to provide the constructor here, and here I will provide public person load person, and this section I'm going to copy this. Now this is basically one interface here. Get in the point. If I'm trying to provide this any exception, this is an exception. Now I need to add this also here. Okay, we need to handle this. Now if you see this, anything we are missing? Now you can see we are not getting any exception. But here we are trying to call the interface reference. So right now the guest is a interface. Now what I'm doing here, we need to create the implementation class. For this particular guest, we need to create. Then only this particular method it is going to call. So observe carefully how I'm trying to create this particular implementation class. So here guest one I'm creating, and the guest one basically it will try to come up with this interface here, and I'm trying to implement this. After implementing this, now what I'm doing is, so I think we know needed this, and this also we know need. So Control Shift F. Control Shift F, basically it is a format the code. Now we format the code here, and guest one is our guest object. Now what I will do, whenever I'm calling this particular round table, this line here internally, it will call the implementation object. But how many objects I want to create here? This is important here. Round table internally, it is trying to depends on this particular guest object. So this is the one of the dependent object here. Whenever I'm trying to create this particular round table, I want to create this particular guest also. How we are going to create this? How we are going to create this particular object in our Spring? Because in the normal Java, we'll go to the main class and we'll create the one by one object we are going to run. But in the Spring, how we are going to create here? This is important. We need to understand here. Now observe carefully. Now what I'm doing here, I'm going to create this particular information here. Let me go to the same file, whatever the file we are trying to use here. So I'm going to comment out the basic example. Now we are trying to move on to this particular round table object. Okay, round table object. The round table object, it's containing two properties. First, let me create the bean first. Here ID. ID is important. Get in the point. ID is important. Now observe carefully how I'm trying to create an ID. Something like a round table I given. Okay. Class I'm trying to providing. Sorry. What is the class here? Something like com dot spring dot core dot, and what is the class we are going to create here? Something like round table. Okay. This particular class contain how many property here? two properties. So how we are defining this particular two properties? If you go to this round table class, these are all the two properties we are defining. So first one is the string, second one is the object type. Get in the bin. First one is a string we are having, second one is a object. And here the first property, how I'm trying to set here, with help of this particular constructor. Okay, with help of this particular constructor. Now this property I'm going to use as a constructor, and this property we are going to use as a one property tag here. Because this is important here. Whenever we are trying to create this particular object here, we are passing this particular name here. Get in the bin. We are trying to pass this particular name. Now observe carefully how I am trying to create here. Here we are having constructor tags. Okay, here we are having one constructor tag. This particular tag, it is going to provide the constructor parameters here. Okay, constructor parameters. Directly I am going to provide the value. So what is the round table we are going to use? Something like a spring. The name of the round table I'm trying to provide as a spring round table. Okay, the constructor tag we provided. Like what is the constructor information? This information. What is the name of the property we are having? The name of the property we are trying to initialize with help of this particular constructor. And later we are having one property here. So why I'm discussing this particular property? Because another one we are not using with help of this particular constructor. Only constructor is taking one parameter. Okay, it is not taking another parameter. So this we can go for the property because it is required here. It is one of the dependent object here. Get in the point. Now if we go to this, now I'm trying to create this particular section with help of this particular property. And what is the name we provided? Guest type provided. And what is the class here? Okay, class we can use here. We cannot use the class. Getting the point. This is important. Here we cannot use the class because it is a dependent object here. We need to use another property here, ref property. Here we need to use a reference here where this particular property is going to use. Now you can see the same I'm going to use as a guest here. Same I'm going to use as a guest. After this particular bean, now I'm trying to create a one more bean and the ID. So the same ID I'm going to create it. So ID and the reference should be match here. And here I'm trying to create a one class here. The class again it should be come up with a fully qualified name here. Spring dot like com dot spring dot code dot and what is the file we can provide? So guest to one we created here. Okay. And internally what we need to understand here. So anything we are creating, I think the person is not required. We are trying to creating inside the guest here. So here is a guest one. Okay, here we are trying to create this particular person object. So because of this, we don't need to create anything. But observe for this particular round table we are creating and the dependent object we are creating here. Then we are going to call this. We can happily call this particular example here. Now we'll go to this particular core. I'm going to copy this. Where is the main file? This is the main file. And I will comment out these three sections here. And the same thing I'm going to use the bean factory dot get bean round table I want to use here. And so this is the reference. And finally what I will do, whatever the round table class we used here, table is equals to convert this round table. Okay, after conversion this, what is the method we are having? Table dot meeting. Okay, table dot meeting. Now if I'm going to run this, what happening internally? So invalid property, what we given? Where we are getting this property? We'll go to here. Otherwise, we'll create one. So it is missing the particular property. Oh, it is not. From where it is trying to load. GUE, it is missing here. Why this particular property, if it is not loading? Anything I'm missing? Constructor I'm providing, and the property we are having same only, and guest one is implementing. Now it's correct only. Okay, now I understand here. Set guest. This dot guest is equals to guest here. And now I will run this. Now you can see it is not printing anything. Why it is not printing? Basically, if I'm trying to use this particular sysout here, it should be used sysout here. Now you can see we are trying to get this particular person object. Okay, the person object. Now what I will do here inside this particular person object, here I'm going to generate the toString here. Okay, here I'm going to generate this particular toString, and with help of this particular toString, we can easily understand the same example. Now we are getting the person ID, name, and first name and last name. Now what you understand here, how we are working with the loose coupling. This is the important example, because here now if you see this object like we just declare here, even though we are trying to use this particular load person, the guest dot load person we are calling. Getting the point here, in any line we are not specifying any new keyword to create a object here. But if we observe carefully, with the help of this particular interface, we can go for the one more important information. We can override we can implement this particular interface, and we can override the method. Getting the point. And here the advantage, basically this line we are not going to modify. This particular line we are not going to modify. If you are trying to come up with the one more object, for example, I'm going to create guest 2, okay, and I'm going to implement from the same interface something like a guest only, and I'm trying to write. And here now what I will do, whatever this the line we declare, I'm going to copy this, and here I will paste this, and here I modify something like 42 instead of this particular spring. Now what we can do, something like I'm trying to give some different name here. So this person is a different person. Okay, now if I'm going to run this, now what happens internally, we'll get the only one object, the first object only I'm getting. Now what is the changes we need to modify in this particular string-code.xml? We need to modify 2 here. Okay, we need to modify 2. Now it will try to update the second record. Getting the point. Now you can see ID 42, first name is Ram, second name is like last name is Kumar. Getting the point. So just we modify in the string-code.xml, but not in the code. But not in the code here. So in the code, in the round table or in the guest related section, I did not modify anything. I created one extra class, and the extra class information I added inside this particular configuration file here, so that the Spring, the container is going to create object right now, guest 2, not for the guest 1 here. But internally, the same, this particular, the dependency we are having here, the property name I'm using the same guest here, and it internally it is trying to use the guest reference one. This reference should match with this particular ID. This is important here. Whenever we are trying to work on the dependent object here, the reference, whatever the reference we are using, and whatever the ID, it should be matched to this particular two objects here. So then only the dependence object is going to inject here. Okay. So any questions here regarding this particular loose coupling here? This is, we'll call it as a loose coupling here without modifying the changes. Getting the point? So just we are going to create the new classes, and the new classes information we are going to modify in the configuration file. Why we are modifying the configuration file? Because we need to, we need to share the information to the container to create the newly created object here, to create object of this particular newly created object here. Because of that, we'll modify this particular configuration file. So along with this, the modification, we are not going to do any changes here. Okay. So any questions?
Sir, how many objects are created here?
2 objects. You can see this is the one bean tag we are creating, and this is the another bean tag. So this particular bean tag is closed here. This is the one tag. So why I'm using this particular constructor and property? The constructor, basically, whenever we are trying to create this particular round table object, there is no default constructor. The parameterized constructor, we are passing this. The round table, this is the value. The string name, whatever we are providing here, the value, it is going to store like this. Okay. And another property, this particular property we are using internally for this purpose, because it is not a primitive type. It is one of the object type here. The custom object we created. Because of this, we are going to create a additional bean tag. This section, it is going to create object of this particular guest 2.
Okay. Okay, sir. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so if we don't have anything, I'm trying to stop the session up to here. We'll continue evening, the continuation of this particular Spring example here. So try to practice this example, because this is very important. So if you're stuck in the basic example, you cannot move whatever we are trying to discuss in the day-to-day sessions here. Okay, so download this particular Maven dependencies, like convert the application, the Maven project, and add what is the jar information we are adding this. As of now, this is the fine, and later we'll discuss adding the additional, the remaining jars, what is the use of this, because this internally it is depending on the Spring Beans as well as Spring particular core jar. Okay, so we'll continue the same continuation session in the evening session.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.